going on, everyone? My name is Ghiman Mckinney, or you can just call me Juice, because that is my nickname. So roughly about a month or two ago, I said on this podcast that Joe Burrow should refuse to play for the Cincinnati Bengals. I said he should pull Eli Manning and refuse to play for the team. And guess what? In the end, Eli Manning won. Same thing with John Elway. John Elway and Eli Manning combined to win 4 Super Bowls. Eli Manning went to 2. He won 2 of them. John Elway goes to 5 and wins 2 of them. So in the end, they won. But I will say, the one thing that I admire about myself as an analyst, as a broadcaster, as a guy that comes on here and makes sports content, as a guy that wants to go into sports television and radio for a full living, once I, graduate from college and get my life together, the one thing that I really like about myself is I will admit when I am wrong. I will admit. I come on here and admit when I am wrong all the time. I have this theory that I will say what my gut tells me. What my gut feeling is what I share with you guys. And if I'm wrong, hey, I just come on here and I own it. I say, I whiffed. And look, I will say before I get into why I believe I'm wrong, if this actually happens, I don't think it will happen. I think that Joe Burrow will just play for whatever team drafts him. And I believe that's what he should do. I won't be mad if Joe Burrow pulls an Eli Manning or John Elway, because let's be real, Mike Brown is not a very good owner. I just don't think he's a great owner. He acts as the general manager of the Cincinnati Bengals. He makes football decisions. Owners are not supposed to make football decisions. You're supposed to hire a real general manager and real people in your building to make the decisions for you. Owners should not be making football decisions. And that has hindered the Bengals for several years now. And that's a real problem. I don't think Mike Brown is a very good owner. He's also very cheap. The Bengals do not spend a whole lot of money in free agency. I don't see anything special with that. They never surrounded Carson Palmer with the amount of talent in order for him to win Super Bowls. They promised to get a real general manager when they had Carson Palmer. They never did it. The Bengals have a very small scouting department. It's not a big free agent destination. And let's be real, the division is very hard. It's very hard. You're going to be going up against the Baltimore Ravens, who to me can become a dynasty potentially one day, even though I do think the Kansas City Chiefs will become the next dynasty. The Pittsburgh Steelers are the most well-run organization in all of football, and Cleveland is one of the most talented teams in all of football right now. They have one of the 5 best rosters in all of football right now, in my opinion. And let's be real, where you land matters. Lamar Jackson, he goes to Baltimore, he wins the MVP. Aaron Rodgers, he drops in the draft, he gets to sit behind Brett Favre, he thrives. Josh Rosen goes to Arizona with a terrible offensive line, with not a lot of great players and support around him. He fails. Baker Mayfield, struggling in Cleveland. Sam Darnold, struggling in New York with the Jets. So I won't be mad at Joe Burrow if he says no to the Bengals. But the reason why I'm wrong, in my opinion, is because if I make a video saying Joe Burrow should not play for the Bengals because I don't believe in their franchise, well, guess what? That means every single year I'm going to need to make another video talking about teams and talking about quarterbacks that should refuse to play for a franchise. Because, let's be real, if the Redskins have the number 1 overall pick next year, I got to keep that same energy, because they're not a franchise that's known for being well run, mostly dysfunction. Same with the Lions. Same with the Jets. Same with the Browns. Last year, I did not make a video saying that Baker Mayfield should refuse to play for the Browns because they're dysfunctional. Why am I giving that energy to Cincinnati? I really thought this over. I said, I'm being a hypocrite. I'm not keeping the same energy. And one thing I do like to do in my analysis is be fair. I don't like to be unfair to people. I'm very realistic. I hate being unfair to, fans, to teams, to players. I try to look at all sides of each argument and dispute them and come up with things to talk about. But either way, the Bengals have not won a playoff game since 1991. I get it. But I will say, in the last couple years, a lot of factors have gone into why the Bengals have not been successful. And I do believe if they get a real franchise-changing quarterback, some of these factors could go in their favor. And look, I will say it's not a great look that Carson Palmer had more success with the Bengals when he left the franchise. He won more games and went further in the playoffs when he actually left the team and went to Arizona, okay? But in the Andy Dalton era, when Andy Dalton was the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, I never believed in them. And guess what? The Bengals actually had talent. They had an elite defense. They had a solid offensive line. They had really good running backs. They had A.J. Green and a bunch of great wide receivers. Go back and look at the Cincinnati Bengals rosters from 2011 to 2015 when they made the playoffs all those years with Andy Dalton. You will find a very well-rounded roster. But guess what? I never believed in the Bengals. You want to know why? Because I felt that Andy Dalton was over his head. And I was right. I never truly believed in Andy Dalton. I never felt he would be an elite quarterback. I never felt you could win a Super Bowl with him. I felt he had a low ceiling. I felt he was overdrafted. Andy Dalton seems like a good guy. I'm not trying to bash him too much, but in the end, I was right because Andy Dalton is 0-4 in his career in the playoffs. And guess what? I'm not a big numbers guy, but he played badly in those playoff games. And the numbers back it up. In 4 career playoff games that Andy Dalton started, he's got a 58 passer rating. He's got 1 touchdown pass. He's got 6 interceptions and a 55% completion percentage. I never believed in Andy Dalton. And guess what? In the playoffs, he proved me right every single time. Now I thought to myself, what if the Bengals had Aaron Rodgers? What if they had Russell Wilson? What if they had an elite quarterback that made A.J. Green look better? That actually elevated the roster that they had. The Bengals had a top 5 roster in football and never could win a playoff game. It was because their quarterback was not good enough and because their coach wasn't good enough. Marvin Lewis, I'm sorry, you seem like a good guy. Bengals fans like Marvin Lewis, but 16 years of Marvin Lewis being in Cincinnati, they won 0 playoff games. 0-7 in the playoffs. And guess what? The harsh reality about Marvin Lewis is that not only could he not get over the hump, he couldn't control his players. Vontaze Burfict, always, getting penalized, having bad looks for the franchise. And the reality is that the Bengals did not do the little things right. Penalties, not paying attention to detail. All those things showed up in the playoffs for the Bengals, and that reflects on your coaching staff. Look at the coaches in the NFL this past year. Freddie Kitchens, not detailed, not organized. Cleveland's a mess. Bill Belichick, for the entire time he's been in New England, when have you ever looked at the Patriots and said they beat themselves? The Patriots didn't show up. They looked awful. They weren't competitive. No, they are always competitive. They are always in every game. They may not win every Super Bowl. They may not win every game, but they're competing. They're going to pay attention to detail, and you are going to have to actually beat that team. That team's not going to beat themselves. That's a fact. And again, I think that you have to give the Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow era a chance. Personally, if you put a gun to my head and asked me, is Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor going to work? To a certain degree, they could. But I don't see a whole bunch of playoff wins, and I don't see Super Bowls. I really don't. I don't believe that Zach Taylor and Joe Burrow will ever get over the hump. But they could at least win a playoff game, I think. I mean, we got to give Zach Taylor a chance. We have to, okay? Listen, I predicted in the offseason this team to be terrible. The Bengals, this past season. I said they would go 13-3. And guess what? I was wrong. But in a good way. Because they stunk even more than I thought they could. They won 2 games. 2 games. 2. They were not a good football team. Let's see what Zach Taylor can do with a quarterback, though. He's a former quarterback. He worked under Sean McVay. Most of Sean McVay's assistants have worked. Example, Matt LaFleur. He goes to Green Bay. They're 1 game away from a Super Bowl in his first season as the coach. Pretty good. And the Bengals, they were actually competitive in some of their games. As bad as they were actually competing. In half of the Bengals games, they lost by one possession. Half of the Bengals games were decided by one possession. Eight of their losses were by one possession. Seattle, Buffalo, Arizona, Baltimore, Raiders, Steelers, Browns, Dolphins. 3 of those teams I mentioned are playoff teams. Seattle made the playoffs. Buffalo made the playoffs. The Ravens made the playoffs. The Steelers were a pretty darn good football team. If they had a quarterback, the Steelers would have made the playoffs. The Browns, they're as talented as any team in football. The Dolphins were one of the best 5-win teams I've seen in a long time. So the Bengals, they were competing in some of these games. They were in some of these games. And I just think that, look, the Bengals have shown that they can put a decent roster on the field. They just did it a couple years ago. In 2011, they put a quality product as far as the players on the field. Now, did they ever go for more than that? No. They didn't make any blockbuster trades. No free agents came to town, and they never got over the hump. But I could say this. The Bengals can be relevant with Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor. And I have a strong belief that everything is God's will. Everything happens for a reason. If I'm Joe Burrow, first of all, I'm just lucky enough to be drafted wherever I'm going to get taken. Because a year ago, Joe Burrow was arguably a 5th-round pick. He moves all the way up to the 1st overall pick. He's the best quarterback in this draft class. He should feel blessed to take on the challenge of Cincinnati. An Ohio kid being picked number 1 overall by a hometown team, the Bengals. He's not from Cincinnati, but he's, close enough. Athens, we get the point. Either way, what if Joe Burrow turns his team around? Then he's a savior. He's the guy that changed the franchise. This is a Cinderella story. An Ohio kid that played his college football initially at Ohio State, gets beat out by Dwayne Haskins, transfers to LSU, and then rises up the boards from a 5th-round pick to the best quarterback in the draft, and he gets picked number 1 overall by the Bengals. What if he wins a Super Bowl in Cincinnati? I won't bet on it, but that's a story that will go in the record books. Joe Burrow could be a legend. And I do believe that Joe Burrow, listen, if it doesn't work out in Cincinnati, you can leave eventually. It's going to be hard to leave, but you can eventually leave. We've seen quarterbacks play for other teams. Peyton Manning never stayed with the Colts. He didn't play for the Colts his entire career. Tom Brady left the Patriots. Carson Palmer, he even left the Bengals. So, look, unfortunately, this is how it goes. You got to play for the team that drafts you, okay? You just have to, okay? Well, you don't have to, but do you really want to be the guy that if Cincinnati does not trade away their pick and you make it known that you don't want to play for that team, how's that gonna look in the locker room? Because let me tell you something right now. From all the things I'm hearing and reading, the Bengals are not going to trade the number 1 overall pick. So what does that mean? If Joe Burrow comes out and says, I don't want to play for the Bengals, and guess what? If they don't trade that pick and they take him, the city's going to know that Joe Burrow is not all in. And when they're losing games, the talk of the town is going to be, well, Joe Burrow didn't want to play for us anyway. He lost the locker room. He's not all in. He's not all about football. That's what Joe Burrow is going to have to deal with. And by the way, I don't even think I would, deny playing for the Bengals. I would just play for whoever drafts me. I really would. Because how can I come on here and say Joe Burrow should do something that I would not do if I was in this position? That is baloney. That's stupid. That's why I'm getting on here and I'm saying I was wrong. Unfortunately, the Bengals are not in a position to win right now. I admit that. They're in a rebuild mode. But Joe Burrow at least has to give this a chance. And I do believe that Joe Burrow should play for the Bengals. He should play for the team that drafts him. It's smart. It'd be good for his reputation. And if things do not work out, hey, there's always a way to leave. Okay, it's a free country. You might get franchise tagged for a little bit. It might be difficult. But eventually, if Joe Burrow wants his way out of Cincinnati, he can find a way to get out of Cincinnati. Trust me. That's my bottom line. And ultimately, I was totally wrong about Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals. Be sure to comment where you agree with me and disagree with me. Love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juice Alert Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I currently am a freshman there right now. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juice Alert Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.